Hey, Martyn, there's plenty more to talk about with that, but some of this, of course, revolves around all of the ideological things that are happening. There is a new petition that's calling for an inquiry into how to treat children with gender dysphoria. What are your thoughts on developments here?
Well, there is a glimmer of light on this issue. I know a lot of people will be really concerned about the whole gender-bending agenda and how that's getting at kids, how that's coming up through the state schooling system in particular, and how that there are gender clinics around Australia transitioning children sort of as young as before their teenage years. And there's something of an awakening taking place on this, the dangers of this issue, which is great. For example, in the United Kingdom, there was a clinic there. It was a globally significant and renowned gender transition clinic called the Tavistock Clinic. And they were the subject of a high court case because a young woman who was transitioned to become a trans man by that clinic in a way that caused her irreversible damage, irreversible changes, terrible impact on her life. She regretted it afterwards, and she said, well, the clinic transitioned me when I was too young to know what I was saying and doing, which of course she was. And so it went to the High Court, and the High Court put out a decision which really eviscerated the Tavistock Clinic. It pointed out that they were gender transitioning autistic children at an enormous rate. Autistic children were drastically overrepresented in the numbers, and they hadn't done anything about finding out the causes for that or guarding against some of the problems there. The clinic had not been keeping records sufficient to be accountable for what they were doing. They nearly universally affirmed gender dysphoria in every child that came to them. They almost never said to the child, "Oh, actually, you're just a tomboy. You're not actually a boy." No, they put them on the puberty blockers and they started the treatment. Absolutely reckless. And the court also pointed out that it was just extremely unlikely, pretty much impossible, that a child would have the ability to consent, to give informed consent to what was being done to them, because they just simply couldn't know the full implication on a life of not being able to have children, of all of the complications that come from the physical changes that they do to your body, of the way in which that profoundly affects your whole existence. They just said, well, that's not possible. Now, that Tavistock Clinic, following that case and through some other things, the National Health Service in the UK has actually shut it down, which is really a cause for rejoicing. It was a globally significant clinic doing this work. And now some 1,000 families are considering a class action against that clinic. And there are also, as a result of that, some precautionary measures coming in Sweden, Finland, France. They're changing their attitude on this whole gender transitioning of kids thing. And also, however, that hasn't filtered down to Australia yet. We're still in Australia transitioning children who are not old enough to consent to having a tattoo, children who, a young girl who might come in and she's a tomboy and all of a sudden she's on the puberty blockers, all of a sudden she's on treatments, and it's not long before these treatments are such that they cause irreversible damage. They cannot be undone. And I've been contacted by people, and it's awful, it's harrowing. Very often they are genuinely suicidal, where they live with all sorts of pain and bodily dysfunction and will do for the rest of their days because of what adults did to them, because of their childish concerns, which are quite normal and part of growing up before they even hit puberty. And the seeds are planted in the school curriculum to talk about gender identity and gender bending. Some schools, for example, in the state of Victoria, can socially transition a child to another gender without parental knowledge or consent. And then the clinics come in and they do their irreversible damage. And I just say it's time it stopped. It really is time it stopped. The Federal Health Department was supposed to do a review into this a couple of years ago under the Morrison government. It was quietly shelved. In the UK, you have a massive revolution taking place in the approach to this issue for good reasons, because of the Tavistock example. In Europe, you have people starting to reconsider. It's time Australia reconsidered, and that's what this petition is all about. There's a petition on the Australian Parliament website to get the attention of the Health Minister and the government to say things are changing in this area. Children are being harmed. It's time we change what we're doing. It's time we had a review into Australian best practice. You'll find a link to that petition on the Australian Christian Lobby website, and people can be assured this is absolutely a key part of our lobbying, and it will continue to be a key part of our lobbying and our campaigning until we see change on this issue. I think it is one of the most terrible human rights abuses that's taking place in our time.
So acl.org.au to find that link to that parliamentary petition.